Welcome to the Sunrise Road, a podcast with conversations that connect and weave hope into the fabric of our shared lives. We are once again live, and we are so excited to be here for this conversation.
Yeah, if you're joining us live, we want to welcome you. And if you're joining us on a podcast platform that will come up later, we want to welcome you as well, including our friend Francis this morning. We're excited that you all are listening to us and excited on this particular day. I'm honored to welcome our friend Ann Williams. Ann is a local artist here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we have now come together for 4 different community art installation projects, which is sort of one of Ann's passion, and we've been happy to partner with her. Ann, you're also not only a friend to me now, but you're also friends with many in our congregation, which is how we found you. So I'm just thankful for the friendship as we welcome you this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me be part of your podcast today. I've gotten to meet quite a few of the congregation, met several of them just from walking at our mall, and that's kind of the connection, how it started. And now that community has grown, and I'm feeling more and more like part of your community as well, which is neat.
Well, I really appreciate one of the things that we first did together is in our what we call our welcome center, and it's a and since that first tree, this is now our 3rd tree. And the reason that we wanted to talk to you today, we continue to be in a series on Matthew 25, where have you seen me? And so we're asking our question, where have we seen Jesus in our community? And one of the things that we did over the summer and that you helped us to do over the summer is to make a very visual representation of where we see Jesus and how we envision being the hands and feet of Christ in the world. So we have this fantastic mural, if you're watching us, that Ann helped us do.
And if you're not watching us, you will want to watch the YouTube of this conversation so you actually see what we're talking about.
Spoiler alert, it's a tree. So Ann, can you share with us about the process of this particular art work piece and what you know about how it came about?
So I was contacted by Barry in the congregation about potentially putting a mural on the food distribution building. And of course, I was excited to work with you guys again and was asked to put together, an idea. And so whenever I come to an idea like this, I really pray over it. I spend a lot of time with it. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I know about where the mural is going to be, who the people are that are wanting to put the mural on, how do these things all connect. And in this in particular, I tried so hard not to go with a tree because we've done a couple already, and yet God kept bringing that to mind, and he kept bringing Psalms 1 to me, which talks about a tree being planted by the water, and that regardless of what is going on around it, whether the circumstances are dry or not, that tree is always flourishing because of where it's planted, and that is a representation of being in the Word of God and meditating on the Word of God and having that be a central part of life, which creates those deep roots. And I thought that was just something of the people that I know of at Eastridge, that is what I would want them to that'd be the representation, and also something to continue to grow toward, is being more deeply rooted in Christ going forward. Because as we serve and as we grow as a community, that is highly important. And so since this was going to be a community mural, one that represented the whole congregation and also the community being served, I thought that was an appropriate visual, and that was the one that God just kept bringing over and over and over again. So I pitched it kind of with my eyes closed, hoping someone didn't go a tree again. And so now we have a tree again, but this time it also involves the congregation getting to make part of that mural, which are the leaves on the trees. And if you don't know anything about trees, trees are quite fascinating in their leaf structure because the leaves are all different shapes and sizes and they all have a different job. So for example, the leaves at the very top of a tree are smaller, and that's so that they don't lose moisture and so that they can collect the light. Whereas the leaves toward the bottom of the tree are going to be larger because they hold in the moisture because they're more shaded. And so it's just kind of interesting how and why I bring that up is because every leaf has its job, just like every single one of us in the body of Christ has our place and our purpose to help make to make our community flourish.
And we should have had you on a couple of years ago when we did this sermon series on trees.
See, there you go.
Information that we did not know then, right?
It ended up being
Okay,
harder
good.
than we thought. So. Yeah, but I think so one of the things that I think really touched us when the idea was pitched to the trustees, and then the session jumped on board because we were doing a series over the summer on expressing our faith, and it was called Today I Choose to Believe. And one of the things that we really grasped on was that every leaf that we did would be different. So can you share a little bit about the idea of the leaves and how the community participated? And then I have a few stories we can share about the leaves and how they were created, and if you have any, that you want to bring up as well.
Yeah. So the idea with the leaves was to use hands as the leaves. Because this is a food distribution building and involves the community, hands are a big part of what's happening behind the scenes, and as one hands food to somebody else, the hands are all involved, and that's that idea too of being the hands of Jesus, the hands and feet of Jesus. And each person was invited to take a wooden hand, and they got to paint it themselves to represent their own faith or represent what they wanted to on that hand. We only had like one stipulation, and that was like no names and no words. I've done things before with others, and then especially when you work with kids, they put their names all over it. And what I wanted it to be was more of the visual representation, which is what we got 99.2% of all of it was that way. I think we had one. And but anyway, yeah, that was the idea, that each person would then make their own hand, and then we would attach those to the tree that had been painted, so that every individual was represented that wanted to take part. So we got to only express faith as a community, but also individually within that community.
I really like that image of the hands. As you were talking about all the leaves being different, I was thinking about all our fingerprints being different, right? There's that individuality there too. Both with people in our community who keep our food pantry going, but also our clients who shop there. I think it is so crucial that we see our clients not just as masses of people who come receive food, but to see the individual, the inherent dignity and the fingerprints that they bring. And the interaction between those hands. I think that's another neat thing I saw about your art piece. You have some hands overlapping or touching or and I think that is really, really beautifully done. Yeah.
I do want to share just a couple stories of when we were making the hands, and Anne and I did not really get a chance to talk when we dedicated the mural, so I don't know if you've heard any stories about what that was like. We unfortunately had to do these on days when Anne just couldn't be with us, and we knew that going in. And so that allowed for a little bit of uncertainty. People kept wondering, am I doing it right? And I kept saying, I know Anne, and I know that she's going to say, there's no wrong to this. Yeah. Like it's art. And one of our young people, her name is Ivy, took very seriously that this hand, and she put a whole bunch of dots on it. And I said, Ivy, what are you doing? And she pulled up her hand and she said, see, it's freckles. And
Mm,
it was like her way of expressing that this was, that this was her
perfect.
style, which I just thought was lovely and wonderful. And then watching so many people who start and don't really know what they're doing and then end up with something that makes sense or doesn't make sense, but it's all beautiful. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not where you were going. And the number of people who tried to put a sunshine and a sky and who then ended up with something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But then we did make an effort to make sure that the community was involved as well. And so different folks who come and participate in our food pantry, but who are not a part of Eastridge Presbyterian
Mm-hmm.
Church, invited to do hands as well, which I just thought was a big part of it. So if you can't see the mural right now, the word community is, at first it was hidden to me, Anne. I didn't see it first.
That's okay. That's okay. That's part of it. No, that's one of the fun things I've done. I paint in this style on murals a lot and always kind of use a word as the grid. And so it's fun when people are like, "Oh, I finally saw it." Finally saw the word. So yeah.
Well, it's so great because community is really holding it together.
Yeah.
Like that's what's bringing it together is the community, which is super important for it's a community food pantry.
Yeah.
It's just our congregation. There's a lot of people who participate. So it's a fun element to it.
That's awesome. That's great.
I'm curious if you could share a little bit about your your creative process. Like, is this piece of art, was this a unique, or is that a typical process that you go through as you develop something and come up with an idea and then the practical parts on design,
Yeah.
putting it together?
Yeah, there's depending on who I'm working with, like we'll just talk about the mural process. I do a ton of different things, but we'll talk about the mural process because it relates to what we did with you at Eastridge. So when somebody approaches me, I try to get as much information. If I don't know the commissioning group, I try to get as much information about their purpose, what they're wanting to see, what are, any visuals that they might already have that they use, or just words to describe them. And oftentimes those are the words that you end up in that grid, also end up with the imagery. But once I have all of that, I usually spend a lot of time, a lot of it is prayer time, before even sketching happens. I walk every morning, and so there are mornings when I just there's some mornings I'm like, okay, God, I have nothing. This is due in 2 days and I have nothing. And usually just through that process, he'll reveal an image, um, uh, in a direction to go. And so that's kind of the starting point. And then I work through a bunch of sketches. Um, Depending on what's been asked of me, it could be one or two sketches. And then I usually go and even before that, I take an image of where that mural's going to go. Because that way then I can lay it out. I actually print that picture out and then I start laying that mural out on the space so that I know what it's going to look like. That helps me later on when I do put the mural on the wall, that I can blow it up and use a projector to blow it up real big, and then that image is there. So once everything then is approved, colors are approved, the idea is approved, then it's just making sure the background practically is ready to receive paint,
Mm.
um, making sure everything is cleaned up. That way, just like you would paint a house, making sure that all the chips are out, making sure everything's ready to go, and then lay that ground down. And then I usually have to come one evening when the sun goes down and draw it on, which within this mural in particular, we came about a half an hour too early. So we sat around and waited. And I think we finally struggled and tried to get some of the lines on. And then finally, half hour later, I was like, yeah, should have just waited. Um, but we got it all on. And then the next day I come back and sure up all the lines. So the reasoning for that is when you project something, the lines aren't completely straight. They're kind of, pixelated. And if I can have all of my lines exactly the way I want them, the image just the way I want them, it makes painting so much easier. So yeah, so then it's just, hauling ladders and moving them back and forth. And I always have all of my paint mixed up and ready to go. So I just have to pull container, and everything's marked out already on a sheet where the colors go. So that when I'm there, I mean, there is some deciding. Things don't always look exactly on the image as they do in the final. But there's less of a need to adjust and change. It's just little bits along the way. So which is good, because then I can just paint and worship. And that's what it is. I'll just paint and worship. I'll put on some music, not always, but just go to town on it and just see where the day goes usually. So yeah, so then it's just trying to figure out how, working in the time to paint in the schedule and deal with temperature and time to come, and how much of a sunburn do I want today? How much, different things like that.
Yeah, the
You
element.
shared with us, right, that you had people who drove by notice how long you were there. Yeah.
Yes, I had one gentleman notice that I had been there all day. He was moving with stuff in his car, and so he couldn't take very big loads. Yeah, and so finally, like, I think I'd been out there from 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was 7 o'clock at night, and he finally stopped and wanted to know all about it and had a lot of questions, and just, it was a good conversation.
Hmm.
It's interesting because I've done a lot of murals in at Gateway Mall here in Lincoln, and I'm always have people stopping by asking questions. So it was interesting to be painting on this wall and not have nearly as many people stop by. I mean, there were some, but not as many, right? They would drive through the parking lot and then leave instead of just like stopping to talk like they would otherwise. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. So when he stopped, it was kind of a big deal. So
It was
we-
it's neat. I mean, sometimes people have referred to our church, the church with the parking lot.
I was just gonna say this, Thomas.
I was in your mind. And I'm kind of hoping that they start saying this, the church with the mural. That would be
yeah.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, what I hope is they start to say this is the church with the community mural.
Even better. Yeah.
I like that. That would be really cool.
Want
And
people
that's interesting because I was thinking about that too as people were driving by, like, because I didn't know that. I didn't know that they referred to your church as a church with parking lot. So yeah, and because I mean, people are seeing it as they go by. And so yeah, I hope that is a thing. I hope that people will say that as well.
I was curious as you was describing your process, how to you pre-mix the paint and everything is ready to go. Do you ever make any mistakes?
Yes. No, and I have a story actually that I haven't told anybody. So I was there working on the mural on a Saturday when nobody was around. And I had to, like, I only had so much time. And because there's rocks at that bottom of the mural, I was so careful every time of where I moved my ladder. But I was getting close to the time to leave on Saturday, and I didn't make sure my ladder was totally shored up. And I climbed, it was just a 6-foot ladder that I have at home. It has, and I can stand on the top of it. Well, I got on the top of it. I'm holding a whole Dixie cup size container of brown paint. And I've painted everything on the mural mostly except the brown paint. And I got to the very top of that ladder, and the bottom went out from under me, and I went down. I went down face first, dropped the paint, and I laid there for a minute, and nobody drove through the parking lot. I'm sure somebody saw me, but I'm laying in there and I'm like, okay, I think everything's okay. Nothing's broken, whatever. I get up. I had paint all the way down the right side of my face, in my ear, down my clothes. And the only spots on the mural that were not painted were the ones that were splattered with brown paint. Nothing else. Because I got up and I'm like, oh no, like, how much am I going to have to repaint? And it was the few spots I hadn't painted yet. They were the only places with brown. So if you go to the rocks and there's a lot of brown paint on the ground, yeah, that's my fault.
Oh
no,
my goodness.
I was fine, but like, yeah, everything was brown. It was hilarious. I had it in my hair. Yeah. Um, so yeah. We can laugh about it. I can laugh about it now. I can tell the story because I'm fine. I didn't hurt anything.
God, no kidding.
Um,
Oh my goodness. Because seriously, as if you're watching or if you're listening on a podcast and you I don't think you can see in our picture online, maybe just a little corner. Once the painting started, we realized we need to paint our building. Like the whole rest of the building need to be refreshed. And
yeah.
so once again, Barry asked Anne for inspiration, what colors? And this
Yes.
is a confession, Anne. So this all happened while I was on sabbatical and I got back and there were all of these, like, these are the colors Anne has suggested. And they chose the color that I was pretty confident was going to be horrible. And I may have shared it with my colleagues in the office and said, can you believe that this is what they chose? Like they chose this. And then our friend Rex, who is a member of the church and a professional painter, and he came and he said, "You're sure this is the color?" And we said, "Yep, that's what the trustees chose." And it's beautiful. It's perfect. How did I not know? Here's my confession. I did not trust you, Anne, and I should have. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted the trustees. I should have said, this is going to be perfect because the whole thing is just, it's beautiful.
It's because red's a wild color to choose for a building.
Right, right.
What
But
they
it
should have,
worked.
what Barry should have told you is, I also live in a red house, so that might have something to do with it.
I have a
Yeah.
red door.
This confession is on tape, Melody. For
I know.
everybody.
It is. Everybody's going to know that I went, because not only did I doubt Anne, but I then also doubted the trustees who then thought that this was going to be, and it's beautiful. It's
Well, good. I'm
beautiful.
glad it all worked out.
I do want to spend just a few minutes of our time that we have left because you have done other pieces of art. And I want to say as a theologian pastor who's busy, a part of my job is actually, helping to run the church, that you have been a joy to work with. And theologically, as a Christian artist, you really, I mean, you said earlier that you worship when you're painting, and I think that you can definitely feel that. And this is our fourth project together. So
Yep.
The first project, can we just talk about the four projects kind of briefly and what they are? The first project was brought to us by a member of the church who I met you in the mall.
Yes. Yeah,
And
I was doing another project in the mall, yeah, and I got to meet her and her granddaughter. And she wanted a piece that would honor her husband's memory and be part of the church, and that was our first connection. Yeah.
And so it's a tree, surprise,
Yes.
surprise.
It's
And
the
with
first
fingerprints.
it hangs in what we call our welcome center. And I might let Thomas finish describing what we do with the tree because he's really a big part of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it is also a tree where we leave our mark. Yeah, we started it off with the community leaving a fingerprint on that tree as a leaf, and it's a project that continues growing because whenever we have a Discover Eastridge conversation or a new member class, and get members join our community, I always joke in the end is like, and now we're gonna fingerprint you. As a person who went through immigration, I'm very familiar with this process.
Yeah.
But we invite people to ink a finger and a thumb and leave a leaf print on that tree, and it's beautiful. Some people will remember which one there is. I placed it, and others like, I'm not quite sure which one was mine, but it's really a living art project that keeps on living, which I really love about that. Yeah.
And
That's good. That's fantastic. I'm glad that continues to grow. So that was always the hope, that it would grow and continue. So,
and there's one person who really took the challenge of, I am sure, like, there's no mistakes. The artist really believes that there's no mistakes. That's why she does community art projects where
Yeah.
and they put their leaf falling from the tree.
Awesome. Yep.
Which
Yep.
that's great. We're all a part of that piece of art. So
Mm-hmm.
the second piece of art that we did together was when we had were completing what we refer to as our Huxtable Lounge, although
Yep.
we really just call it the Huxtable, and it serves as a chapel when we need a chapel and a meeting space when we need a meeting spaces. There's graduation parties in there, and we wanted a piece that would honor our church's past, present, and future, and that something that we could gift a copy of, a print of, to Bryce Hastings, who has his thumbprint is literally over every renovation and building part of this church. So, do you remember what that? That was a few years ago, but
I do remember some of it. I don't remember all of it because I had my own chat. Like that piece, and I think Melody, we've talked about this before. That piece came to me at a very critical moment when I was not able to be serving in my own church community creatively. And God brought your church at just the right time to be a reminder to me that He still had more work for me to do in His body as an artist. And started to expand my vision of what that could look like. And so when you guys asked me to do that, the painting is actually a secondary version of the first. Like I tried again not to do a tree, and it ended up being a tree. The first thing I pitched came back to me and was like, that's not what we want. I was like, okay. So we went back and we ended up with a tree. And but yeah, it represents that through time. And then moving forward, I think there's even a small like a cityscape, I believe, in the background of that one. And that one was to be that future direction of reaching the city that we're part of. But yeah, it's been fun. I've come for a couple different things or had friends that have had concerts or something like where they're singing like a music concert or something, and that will be in the Huxtable, and it'll be fun to see that in the background. It's neat. Uh, it's so to me, artwork each has their own life, almost like a person, right? So to see that piece of work be part of so many things, or the background of so many things. It's living what it was meant, what it was speaking. Like, yeah. So the vision of it's living that out, which is really neat.
yeah, it's really cool. One of the things I love in particular about that piece of art is, again, the leaves, and some of them are falling and
Yeah.
blowing into the wind. And, we're a community that was once established on the edge of town and what was once farmland and now
Yeah.
is geographically in the middle of town, in a neighborhood, and there's new growth there and new possibilities. And one of the things that we did, oh gosh, we've done now several times, is we have something called mental health cafes,
Okay.
and the speakers have been there, and so we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about things that are really can be very difficult and that make us very vulnerable. And if there's any pictures of those, they always have that picture, that painting in the background.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's
such a lovely, lovely
For,
thing.
for me, it's also you mentioned that the story of our congregation, and that was part of when we remodeled that space and envisioned the new use of that space. It was an anniversary celebration as well of our congregation. I think it was our 65th, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Something like
and
that.
and so for me, it's also that I keep thinking of the hymn, our God, our help in ages past, and so there's
Mm-hmm.
that change of times and the change of seasons and the faithfulness of God I see there at work. So I think it is a powerful reminder of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Our third art project was Thomas and my attempt to do something meaningful during Advent, during the
Mhm.
pandemic. when people could leave and could get out of their house. It was the second advent of the pandemic. So we
Okay.
could have things in public spaces, but just not with people gathered at the same time. So
Yeah.
we set up every week different prayer stations and invited people to come every week. And we explored the stories of the women that Matthew calls upon in the genealogy at his genealogy of Jesus at the beginning of Matthew. And so we sort of gave you this challenge of here's the 4 women, come up with something we can do together.
Right. And that was turning you guys all loose to your own devices with some kind of one suggestion each week. Yeah, because we had a gate, and that's where we attached every piece. And I can't remember all of the pieces. Because every week was something different to attach to that gate and fence line. So there was like we weaved ribbon through there or cording through there. There were some beads that went like handmade clay beads that went through there.
Handmade beads.
Rahab living in the wall. Yeah, that was the
Yeah. Well,
And
I don't remember the other two.
lots and lots of beads. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, lots and lots of beads. Yeah, I
And
had this thing with doing multiples of things.
your family just like there she's making thousands of beads. That's what she's doing.
Yes, yeah. I
Never
had them one time help me string 1,000 rectangles for a piece of art. And like we were literally up for lots of hours just stringing pieces of thread through the top of a rectangle. 1,000 is a lot.
was an interesting story experience for Melody and I because we we came up with these stations and we had quite a few attending the first week and not as many the following week. And then after the Advent season, someone mentions to us saying like, "Oh, I thought that was the same stations every week," and we were making up new stations
Right.
every week,
Yep.
but people perceive that as the same project throughout Advent. So that's
Yep.
a little difficulty to translate that.
Yeah, and that's not that happens with things like that. I've experienced that before. Things that are consecutive like that, you trail off because of that very purpose or reason. They think it's the same every week when it's not. Yeah. No.
Well, and it still is something that we hold in our back pocket that, we still have lots of beads. We still have lots of supplies that we can,
Good.
if we ever do that again in a Bible study or, and
Yep.
I think, so I don't want to say that I have a favorite project, but I think that for me, the gate project was probably the one that spiritually was the most, I don't want to say it had a lot of depth to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because women in the genealogy, and I really appreciated Thomas and I were trying so hard to honor them and their story and lift up their story and to have people interact with it. And it was just, it meant a lot to me that as an artist, we could sort of trust that you were doing the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Or
when that
also-
first came to me, it was study upon study, and again, like you said, trying to honor their part and in that story and how to represent, what you guys were trying to portray and get across, and to also how you were wanting to honor them. And those are that touches on that theological part, that really deep part, and those those get me super excited. I like any project to express faith, but when I can really dig into scripture and try to represent something, those are the most challenging, not just on the artistic side, but also my own heart and how I approach the story that God has laid out in his word.
Well, we really appreciate you. I want to give you a minute if you want to plug kind of what's coming up next for you. And if anybody wanted to get a hold of you to commission you as an artist, you do Christian art, but you also do community art installations, which we love. But you also do art separately from that. So
yeah, I do all sorts of things. I love the challenge to create art for anything. Right now I'm working on a series of mosaic work that include, of course, trees. And it's kind of a culmination of all the things I've done over the last 20 years, painting and mosaics and sculpture. And those I've been traveling with to show at shows. I also have some work. I'm working with Gateway Mall, like I do a lot, to put on a show of about 11 artists this coming Saturday. Um, they're just people that I've known from different shows in the area, local, and we got asked to kind of bring some art to this space. Which is an incredibly diverse space in our community. So I'm kind of excited for that day. And then it's just they have me wanting to do another project that uses the words "every day is a good day," um, and we're putting that up in the mural as a reminder to people as they walk through that every day is a good day. There is good in every day, and that comes out of some working with the staff and some of what they're currently going through in their own personal lives. And that's the message they want to portray. So that's coming early part of next year. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm about for the next few months. But it usually, God brings a whirlwind and here we go. So that's kind of what it'll be. So now it's just being in the studio, working on stuff every day, and then watching and seeing where God's working and where he wants me to go next. So I try to keep a website up to date. I'm not always good at it. It's ann.envisiongalleries.com. I usually try to post like sometimes a blog, not very often, sometimes process photos of murals or whatever we're working on. And if you go to the website, you can get a hold of me there. There's a contact button there. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. There's also a spot there to, follow me. Click on that button. That's probably the easiest route to go. Yeah.
And if you see Anne standing on a top of a 6-foot ladder,
remind me to be careful.
Yeah.
Or with brown color all over one
Or
side.
yeah. Just keep on going.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's always a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
It's good to talk to you as well. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.